Good day to all newcomers and already ardent fans of the Mu Online universe. Bless Universe is speaking, one of the most experienced, popular and stable projects of the Mu Online universe. I am glad to inform you that the next few videos, including this one, will be devoted to guides on all the characters available on our project. We will try to analyze all stages of the game, builds, stats and so on. The first character on our list will be Elf. Briefly about the class. Elf is one of the strongest, if not the strongest class in early game. There are two main types of Elf: AE, Agility Elf, EE, Energy Elf. Simply, AE is a damage dealing spec and EE is a support spec. A strong EE is a strong group. A weak EE is a weak group. In other words, support in form of elf buffs is the basis for most classes in Mu, and without good equipment and positioning of the elf, it will be incredibly difficult for you. The elf is not catastrophically dependent on top items as most of the classes in order to be useful and needed. The exception is probably Good Wand. Buffs are very dependent on it. AE has a large attack range, allowing him to stay at long distances, but the closer the enemy to him, the higher the frequency of the damage from skills such as multi-shot. Support elves are always in demand both among guilds and at the events, especially as a support role and in leveling with regular groups. Unless at the start of the new server there are usually predominant number of elves. I think that's enough about the class briefly, and let's try to move on to more detailed analysis from beginning to the end. So you choose Elf. This means that you either want to jump into the new server in a big way and compete for rare monsters and bosses from early days, or you just like this beauty. Each class has its main stat, which gives them damage. For the Elf it's Agility. Briefly about the stats. The Elf gets 5 stats per level. Strength always adds physical damage to characters and also required to carry certain items. Agility by default grants attack speed, defense and chance to dodge attacks. Stamina adds more health. And energy gives mana and also required to carry some items and use some skills. As we can understand, agility as a main stat gives a great advantage, because if most other classes you need to maintain 2 stats in balance, namely strength and agility or intelligence, so the defense, speed and attack are at the same adequate level, then the elf can focus more on combat indicators, pumping up strength only for carrying items, and agility will give most of the basic characteristics you need. This greatly helps the elf to accelerate much faster than others in PvP in the early stages of the game, in addition to take advantage of the enormous range of their attacks, blowing away most of the enemies in their path before they even can reach them. The elf's early strength is also determined by the fact that the elf's only dependence on the weapon is the need to have a skill on the weapon for a triple shot on a non-excellent weapon, or simply any excellent bow or crossbow, which by default will already have a triple shot in it. As I already said, elves really do not rely much on the items at the initial stage. Don't get me wrong. All classes need the right items, but when it comes to the initial stage of the game, elves feel much better than others. For example, the mage is very dependent on the percentage of magical damage on the staff that he carries, which is why you can often see soul masters using two-handed staffs with which they are not able to carry shields, thus sacrificing protection for the sake of the damage they need so badly. Additionally, most of the classes suffer greatly from lack of mana, or AG, aka stamina, which is shown in purple, while elves have minimal mana costs. Elves also do not need to spend a lot of stats on energy, since most of the spells they need will be limited by 295 energy for Starfall skills, for example. Should I even explain that at the start each stat plays an important role in the strength of the characters? Probably not. In the late game, the Battle Elves gets a lot weaker if you did not take care of a good set and weapons, enjoying the early strength. At that point, other classes received the required number of stats, beginning to catch up and even sometimes overtake the elves in strength, so do not forget that in the end you will have to look for high quality set and weapon, and then you can become a formidable ranged fighter. So that you don't feel completely sad thinking that elves become weak in the late game, I need to say that it is not true. You are almost the only class that gets damage from 3 types of characteristics. Strength is needed to carry items in the first place and also adds damage. Agility adds attack speed, defense and damage. Stamina adds health points and damage. Energy adds mana points, damage and buff power. All you need to know is that strength gives the same amount of damage as agility and stamina. Energy provides twice time more, but there are nuances that will have to be dealt with in practice. So you elf, like all other classes, appear in the initial location, the adventurers camp in the southeast of Laurencia. You level up, get items, complete quests. By the way, the ease of completing quests is also a very important point of choosing a class, since completing the main and side branches of the quest will literally take throughout your entire game, and believe me, doing quests on BK is hell. The elf feels quite comfortable in this regard, which adds interest to this class. All this time before, we were looking at the agility elf. This is essentially the fighter who deals physical damage, but there is variation of the elf support. The fundamental difference will be a different distribution of stats, where your main stat will be energy, which will affect the strength of your buffs. The elf has several support skills, such as greater defense aka def, greater damage aka DMG, ASD recovery aka ASD, healing aka heal, and combo damage. All of the listed abilities depend on the amount of energy stat and the total amount of mana of the elf, from which we can conclude that agility elf and energy elf are very different in the items they need and in the role in the game. Energy elves carries wands that increase the strength of his buffs, just as staff increases magical damage to mages as a percentage. Also, when collecting armor for yourself, an energy elf should focus on following options in order of priority in the items. Damage decrease in order to live longer and take less damage. This is generally the most important option for you. Max mana. It helps you to increase the maximum mana pool, and as I said, EE aka Energy Elf depends on the maximum amount of mana, which enhances your spells. This is how our server formula looks like. Take a look. And max HP. You need to live longer and position yourself well, and the extra HP will allow you to achieve maximum stamina. Logically, the fourth option should be Reflect. After all, EE is capable of taking a hit, and given the amount of his HP, it can tank if there is no BK nearby. But this is not for everyone. Probably any other will give the same set bonus points. It is in this order of importance that the options on the items will be distributed. That is, if at a particular moment you only have a DD option in your set, then you strive for items with a minimum of DD plus mana options. And your ideal is DD mana HP, and if you're damn lucky, then some other option in order to get a bigger set bonus. But situations are different. Sometimes damage decrease is not a priority. If you are playing EE and your party needs a buff, the first set must be with mana, even without other options. This is especially important in the early stages of the game. Don't forget that the higher the grade of the set, the more expensive it is and the more set bonus it gives to you. We have already talked about the set bonus and many other things that is listed in the previous guide, so go watch them if you didn't, please. So we move on. EE is the most popular variation of elves in middle and late stages of the games, since it is this kind of elf that leads most groups to victory, because almost no class in the entire game fights without elf buffs. In addition, support elves are always and everywhere needed, and guilds are almost always looking for an active and knowledgeable EE. Not all players can position themselves correctly and use every 3 seconds during the battle to update buffs, restore SD shields to allies, heal them, assess the situation and keep up with the consistently moving group. Yes, they will try to protect you, but I assure you there will be players from whom you will die almost instantly, which is why I talk so much and often about the ability to position yourself in fights. And as a nice bonus, elf can also summon quite strong pets, such as Bali and Soldier, who are very strong in early and mid game, and few will be able to cope with them. I'll leave the question open for you on how to use them. But what about itemizing AE? Well, everything is simple here. Damage decrease will also be the main stat for both you and other classes in 95% of cases. We live longer, we can do more. Still, the same max HP, but already higher in priority than EE as additional survivability, since unlike EE, we more often get in direct clashes with the enemy. Defense rate 10%. This option for most classes is needed only as an addition for the set bonus, but for AE it also plays the role of the amplifier of damage from a special attack on our server called Combo. We will talk about it later. The higher the elf's defense rate, the stronger he hits enemies with combos. Therefore, if you already have the ability to do combos, then this option becomes the second priority. Reflect damage is a universal option, and it's needed as an additional one for all classes. But if you play throughout the multi-shot skill and have already gained superiority in items, the reflect becomes more important as an option, since you will rely more on consistent damage rather than burst with combos, which forces you to face your opponents up close more often. It is time to review the elf's combo attack with you. Combo is a special attack on our server which has recently become available not only for BK but for all classes in the game. Combos are achieved by pressing the correct sequence of 3 attack abilities. First, triple shot or multi-shot, second, Starfall, third, Ice Arrow. And if pressed correctly, when damaged by Ice Arrow, a pop occurs, causing double damage passing through the enemy's armor. In this combination, Starfall and Ice Arrow can be swapped as desired, as it's more convenient to you. The combo opens upon obtaining the third profession, and generally begins to be used frequently in the middle and late stages of the game. It is because in these stages of the game, opponents already become resilient enough not to die from simple attacks, and manage to quickly restore health by drinking potions. Some stat tips. Let's start with AE. Strength must be filled as needed to wear armors and weapons. In the late game, when agility is already at maximum, that is 32,767 stats, as well as either maximum or a sufficient amount of vitality, it is up to your taste, but I advise you to pump up vitality to the limit. Invest the remaining stats in strength if you use an ancient set to increase your physical damage to the maximum possible, since such sets greatly increase direct damage from the skills. For example, Ignored Red Spirit set, here you sacrifice a lot of defensive indicators, gaining 12% chance of double damage and 25% chance of ignoring enemy's armor. Or ranked lower Raisin set, 11% of double damage and 20% ignore. Such sets creating a glass cannon out of your elf, so you hit hard but also take a lot of damage. Agility is filled from all your free stats and you should ultimately be at maximum. Stamina is also very important, essentially important in PvP. If you know that you like to fight and you want to compete for the bosses in initial stages, then you definitely need to fill stamina in amount of 20-30% of the total amount of stats to be more durable in battles. Energy. At the start, this stat is needed only for a sufficient amount of mana for AFK leveling and to learn some important abilities. In general, this is 5 or 10% of the total number of stats, somewhere around 300, 500 and 1000. In the later stages of the game, with maximum stamina and agility, you fill the remaining stats with energy if you wear an excellent set and maximize damage from combos. In such a build, your main damage will be a combo damage, and energy gives significantly more damage to a combo that strength do. And also in solo game, without a group, you will feel better, since you are strengthening your buffs too. For EE, here is everything a little simpler. EE is rarely taken in early stages of the game when there are too few stats, and EE is highly dependent on them and on mana, so there is almost no point of talking of the early game for support. But if there are some EEs, then with good items and those who already understand their class getting most out of it. Strength is only for carrying items. Agility is needed in order not to die from monsters in the average game, and in the future it will be limited depending on the server settings, from 9000 to 14,000 agility for most servers. We try to bring vitality almost to the maximum while maintaining a sufficient amount of agility, approximately 50% max energy, 20% agility, 30% stamina, from all amount of stats. Well, and energy, we try to keep at the level from 40 to 50%, and by the late stage we bring it to maximum. In general, we try to max it out as early as possible in order to be useful to your group as early as possible, giving a strong buff. In the description of the video, I will leave several links to combo formulas and stat formulas for those who want to read the information in more detail. If we were able to help you in any way, we will be glad for your like, subscription, and you can add information about the guide in the comments. Why not? We're really waiting for Elf guys. Thank you for watching to the end and play Mewbless Universe.